Have you ever wondered why some men, not the most handsome, not the richest, not even the most charming, seem to possess a magnetic pull that makes them irresistible to women? We're not talking about the classic movie heartthrob or the sweet-talking flatterer tossing around empty compliments. We're talking about that man who, the moment he steps into a room, seems to tilt the balance in his favor. His presence is commanding. His silence carries weight. His gaze is both unsettling and alluring. He doesn't say much, but when he does, everyone listens. What is it about him? What makes this man so different? The one who doesn't need to ask for attention because he already has it. To answer that, you don't need self-help books or modern-day love gurus. You just need to turn your eyes to one of the most feared and misunderstood thinkers of the Renaissance, Niccolò Machiavelli. Because deep down, the art of attraction, just like the art of ruling, isn't about luck. It's about strategy. Love, no matter how much we dress it up in romantic disguises, is still a game of power. Those who understand the rules win. Those who don't, surrender. And this is exactly where Machiavelli's ruthless insight becomes valuable. He didn't write fairy tales or happy endings. He wrote about conquest, about holding on to power, and above all, about not losing it once you've got it. Maybe that's why his ideas still make people uncomfortable, because they strip away the illusions we'd rather live with. Applied to relationships between men and women, his ideas can feel unsettling, even offensive to some. But that discomfort is often a sign that we're getting close to something true. Because truth, especially when it's tied to desire, is rarely gentle. Too often, we confuse confidence with niceness, affection with weakness, and interest with neediness. We believe that to be loved, we have to be agreeable, accessible, endlessly available. And in that illusion, we fall into the trap of erasing the one thing we truly need to preserve, our self-respect. Machiavelli wouldn't have tolerated that. To him, kindness without power is a dangerous form of naivety. And a man who gives himself away without limits, without strategy, without awareness of his own worth, is doomed to be used, discarded, or ignored. Not because women are cruel, but because all human beings, men and women alike, respond to the invisible language of status, strength, and presence. And that presence isn't about muscles or money. It's about the inner solidity with which a man moves through the world. There's something deeply attractive about a man who doesn't need approval, who doesn't beg for affection, who doesn't crumble at the first sign of rejection. The kind of man who doesn't chase, but doesn't run either, who can stay, but doesn't have to, who listens, but doesn't let himself be dominated. His power doesn't lie in what he has, it lies in what he doesn't need. In his ability to walk away without losing anything. In his strategic indifference. In his self-control. These traits, which to some may seem cold or calculating, are in fact the reflection of a personality that understands respect is the foundation of desire, and without respect, there is no lasting attraction. But this kind of man isn't born that way. He's built. He's shaped. Forged in solitude, in failure, in watching himself struggle with his own weaknesses. And this is where Machiavelli can become an unexpected ally. Because far from being a ruthless cynic, as he's often portrayed, he was a profound realist. A sharp observer of the human soul, with all its flaws and glories. A man who knew that human nature is not good by default, and that's why anyone who wants to survive, let alone thrive, must learn to play smart. Not to always be kind, not to always be tough, but to know when, how, and why to act in one way or another. Because true power isn't rigid. It's flexible. It adapts, transforms, hides when necessary. But it never disappears. Just as a prince had to master the art of war to keep his kingdom, a man who wants to command respect in love must master the art of handling his presence, his desire, and his silence. He must learn to say no without guilt, to walk away without drama, to set boundaries without raising his voice. He must train himself not to fear solitude, because the solitude of a strong man is not a curse. It's his sacred ground, where he reconnects with himself. From that place, and only from that place, can he approach a woman without losing himself in her. He can desire her without becoming submissive. He can love her without erasing himself. Perhaps the most magnetic trait of a high-value man is his ability to sustain mystery. Not the cheap kind of mystery faked through cryptic lines or emotional games, but the deep mystery of someone who doesn't give himself away completely. Not because he's afraid, but because he respects himself. Someone who doesn't show all his cards, because he knows that what's valuable isn't handed out, it's earned. Someone who, even in intimacy, preserves an inviolable corner of his soul. a place that belongs to no one but himself. And that, though few admit it, is deeply fascinating. Because in a world where everyone chases after someone else, where love has become almost synonymous with total fusion, finding someone who doesn't dissolve, who doesn't give himself away like spare change, who can love without losing himself, that is becoming rare. And what is rare, when it's real, is always valuable. Machiavelli's philosophy won't teach you how to write poetry or impress with flowers and fancy dinners. But it can teach you something far more profound. How to become someone who inspires desire without trying to provoke it, who commands respect without demanding it, who earns admiration not through what he gives, but through what he represents. And in an era drowning in superficiality, that is more attractive than any pose. So if you're tired of playing the nice guy who always gets sidelined, if you felt that your genuine desire for a woman becomes your greatest weakness, if you've ever wondered why respect seems to vanish just when you need it most, maybe it's time to start looking at things from a different angle. This isn't about turning into a manipulator or playing with people's emotions. It's about recognizing the power that comes when you stop seeking approval and start governing yourself. Because the man who governs himself, who observes himself, who corrects himself and grows stronger, is the man who doesn't need to compete. Because he doesn't enter the game to win a woman. He enters so that he doesn't lose himself. And for a woman who values inner strength, that is more attractive than any superficial conquest. And you? Are you ready to stop begging for attention and start becoming the kind of man who naturally attracts it? Do you have the courage to lose, to be misunderstood, even rejected, just so you don't give up your inner power? Are you ready to be a prince, not of fairy tales, but of character? If your answer is yes, then get ready. Because Machiavelli won't tell you what you want to hear, but he will tell you what you need to know. And from there, everything changes. Because you change. And when you change, the world, including the women around you, can't help but notice. One of the first lessons Machiavelli gives us is brutally clear. Affection does not guarantee respect. And when it comes to leadership, respect is far more valuable than affection. Why should it be any different in human relationships, especially in the game of attraction? A man who constantly strives to be loved, who seeks approval at every step, ends up provoking pity or boredom, not desire. Because what comes too easily, what's always available, loses its value. True attraction is born from the tension between desire and uncertainty, between closeness and boundaries. If you give everything from the start, if you emotionally undress in front of someone who barely knows you, you become predictable. And predictability, while comfortable, is rarely fascinating. Machiavelli would say power is not surrendered, it is exercised. In love, that means not placing your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. It means not tying your self-worth to a response, a message, or an I love you. It means learning to be with yourself, not as a performance, but as a solid refuge. Because a man's true worth isn't measured by the attention he gets, but by how little he needs it to keep moving forward. That strategic detachment isn't coldness, it's dignity. It's not indifference, it's control. Because the man who can walk away when he needs to, who isn't afraid to lose someone if it means saving himself, is a man who's learned the hardest truth. Neediness is the enemy of respect. To be desired doesn't mean to be good. It means to be rare, intriguing, solid. It means showing that you can share your world, but not that you're willing to give it away. Women, like all humans, are sensitive to the nonverbal language of inner status. They can tell, without a word being spoken, when a man acts from genuine desire and when he acts from need. And there's nothing that kills attraction faster than need disguised as affection. Machiavelli would never advise trying to please everyone. In The Prince, he warns that those who try to be liked by all end up being respected by none. And how many men fall into that trap? Eager to be liked, they become overly nice, harmless, predictable. They work hard not to upset, not to disagree, not to seem too much. But in trying so hard to be nice guys, they become invisible. Because what doesn't provoke emotion, whether admiration, attraction, or even a stimulating discomfort, simply doesn't stay in memory. The high-value man isn't afraid of being misunderstood. He's in no rush to prove he's a good person. He knows that those who value him will do so not because of what he gives immediately, but because of what he stands for over time. That ability to withstand the judgment of others without collapsing, to hold a calm gaze even when others doubt him, is a sign of power. It's not arrogance, it's knowing who you are even when others haven't figured it out yet. And that takes patience. Machiavelli understood that impatience is the enemy of power. The same goes for the art of seduction. The man who chases, who pressures, who needs an immediate answer, doesn't understand the game. Seduction isn't about forcing. It's about knowing when to advance and when to pull back. It's about tolerating silence without trying to fill it with unnecessary words. It's letting silence do its job. Sometimes, simply being unavailable, not replying right away, continuing with your life as if you need nothing at all, says more than 1,000 rehearsed phrases. But this isn't about manipulation. The difference between manipulation and mastery, Machiavelli might say, lies in intention. Manipulation tries to control others. Mastery is about self-control. And that self-control, that ability to not be a slave to your impulses, is exactly what increases your value. Because desire isn't wrong. What makes it destructive is the anxiety with which we express it. A man who can desire without begging, who can show interest without losing composure, who can express affection without becoming fragile in the face of indifference, holds something the modern world has forgotten: temperance. That kind of man doesn't need to shout his worth. His very presence says it all. And in an age of overexposure, where everything is shared, commented on, and displayed, that is deeply seductive. Because it represents something rarely seen. A man who saves himself for someone worthy. Who doesn't reveal everything, not out of fear, but out of discernment. Who doesn't open his world to the first sign of attention, but chooses whom to open it to. And that careful selection, far from pushing others away, draws them in. Because what is exclusive, rare, and demanding always carries a natural magnetism. Machiavelli knew that appearance matters, but not more than essence. You can fake confidence for a while, but sooner or later your true inner state will come to the surface. That's why the high-value man doesn't just work on his image, he works on himself. On his thoughts, his decisions, his discipline. Not because he wants to impress, but because he knows the external reflects the internal. When you rule yourself, it shows. When you live in alignment with your values, it shows. When you're not dependent on anyone's validation, it shows too. And all of that, without saying a word, commands respect. A respect that can become desire. But that desire doesn't come from what you give. It comes from what you represent. From your ability to remain standing when others collapse. From your choice to act not out of lack, but out of purpose. From your courage to stare rejection in the face and move forward without betraying yourself. It's curious how the very same principles that make a leader respected also make a man desirable. It's not about wealth, or beauty, or superficial charm. It's about personal power. About having direction. About having purpose. About not making love a goal, but a consequence of how you live. Because the man who seeks love to fill a void is lost. But the one who finds it while walking his own path, that man truly deserves it. In the end, it all comes down to a single idea: your worth doesn't depend on how others see you, but on how you see yourself when no one's watching. If you can hold that gaze without looking away, if you can inhabit your life without asking for permission, if you can be yourself without needing to be liked, then you're closer than most to achieving what many believe is impossible: being desired for who you are, not for what you give. Admired, not for what you pretend to be, but for what you truly embody. That is what Machiavelli, perhaps unintentionally, leaves us as a legacy. An invitation to abandon naivety. To stop searching outside for what can only be built within. Because true attraction isn't shouted. It's breathed. And when a man learns to breathe from his power, the world inevitably starts to revolve around him. So, what remains after everything? After the masks, the desperate attempts to be liked, the unanswered messages, the doubts, the insecurities disguised as kindness, the empty gifts, the efforts made just to be seen, what's left when a man stops and looks at himself with no filters, no excuses, no pretenses? What remains is the truth. And the truth, though uncomfortable, is the only starting point for becoming someone truly valuable. Machiavelli wasn't the soulless cynic people think he was. He was a realist. He saw the world as it was, not as he wished it to be. He understood that power doesn't lie in aimless kindness, but in the ability to act intelligently, strategically, with full awareness of one's surroundings. So why not apply that to our relationships? Why keep believing that just being good is enough to be loved, desired, or respected? Reality, as Machiavelli warned, doesn't reward naive goodness. It rewards clarity, strength, and consistency. It rewards the one who knows how to move without kneeling. Being a high-value man isn't about dominating anyone or masking emotions with coldness. It's about holding your center in a world constantly trying to pull you off balance. It's about living with such integrity that rejection doesn't rob you of your peace and praise doesn't intoxicate you. It's living as if you already know, without arrogance, that your life has meaning even if no one chooses you. Because true value isn't begged for. It's embodied. And that is something women, those who also respect themselves, who seek authenticity, can perceive with a clarity that can be unsettling. They don't want the man who's always available, because that shows he has nothing else going on, nothing else to be. They don't want the one who says yes to everything, because that reveals a broken will, a blurred identity. They don't want the one who loves without knowing, because that's not love, it's lack. They want, even if they don't always say it, a man who knows how to be alone without turning to stone, who can sit in silence without feeling indebted, who doesn't fear losing because he has already found himself. That man doesn't need to compete, to please, or to impress. He just needs to be. And that being deep, steady, calm, becomes magnetic. There is something in the man who doesn't need love that, paradoxically, makes him worthy of it. Not because he rejects affection, but because he's not willing to lose himself to get it. Not because he doesn't feel, but because he knows when to feel and when to protect himself. And that balance is so rare, so precious, so beautiful that whoever finds it doesn't let it go easily. But getting to that point isn't easy. It means shedding many inherited ideas, many myths. The myth of the good man who deserves love just for being good. The myth of if you give your all, it will be returned. The myth of if you show vulnerability from the start, you'll attract understanding. All these myths, so sweet yet dangerous, collapse at first contact with reality. Because reality, as Machiavelli said, rewards those who can read it. Those who don't cling to ideals when the world has already changed the rules. Those who don't wait for justice in a system not designed to offer it. Those who don't expect to be loved as they love, but who love with lucidity, not fantasy. That's the hardest thing to accept. That not everyone will love you, even if you're honest. That not everyone will choose you, even if you give your all. That not everyone will value you, even if you offer the best of yourself. And that says nothing about you, but everything about them. Only when you accept this without bitterness, without playing the victim, you free yourself. You stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop fighting battles that were lost the moment the other person chose silence. And then something shifts. You stop being in conquest mode and enter presence mode. You no longer try to please. You just are. And being, with dignity, is more powerful than any clever line or romantic gesture. Because that being speaks of someone who's done the inner work, who has walked through the fire of disappointment, abandonment, and contempt, and come out stronger, not harder. Wiser, not more cynical. More selective, not more closed off. That man, the one who has learned to walk alone without feeling lost, radiates a different kind of light. He doesn't shine to be seen. He shines because he can't help it. And that light doesn't shout. It doesn't impose. It simply exists, silent, steady, real. And those in tune with truth recognize it, seek it, cherish it. Machiavelli wrote for rulers. But unknowingly, he also wrote for every man who wishes to rule himself in a world that constantly tempts him to betray who he is. Because the greatest challenge is not conquering others. It's conquering yourself. It's not about being liked, it's about standing firm. It's not about receiving love, it's about being able to live without it when it doesn't come. That's the man who matters. Not for what he owns. Not for how many follow him. Not for how many desire him. He matters because he rebuilt himself from his ruins. Because he chose to be real instead of perfect. Because he picked truth over the sweet comfort of lies. And on that path, ironically, he finds what others never reach, relationships based on mutual respect, silent admiration, and deep attraction born when two souls don't need each other, but still choose one another. That's the mystery of the high-value man. He doesn't try to be desired. He simply becomes someone impossible to ignore. Not because he shouts. Not because he chases. Not because he tries. But because his very existence affirms what many fear the most, that you don't need the world's approval to walk in strength, that you don't need to be wanted to walk with confidence, that you don't need anyone to choose you to know you've already chosen yourself. And when a man reaches that point, when he can look in the mirror without looking away, when he can inhabit his solitude without anguish, when he can be himself even when love doesn't come, then, without trying, he begins to attract what truly matters. Not out of need, but because he no longer has one. Because he finally understood what Machiavelli tried to tell us centuries ago, that the greatest, most subtle, most attractive kind of power is the one born from a man who belongs to himself.